That last lesson we talked about was finding equivalent fractions, and this next is very similar in that these fractions are equivalent. They are the same. They do mean the same amount. But whenever we're talking about equivalent fractions, we were talking about adding lines. We were putting more lines into our pictures, okay? And instead of having thirds, we just added more and we cut the pieces into smaller pieces. Well, this time we're going to be doing the opposite. This time we're going to be taking lines out, and that is called simplifying fractions. Okay, and this is where we take out lines. We make them easier to draw, which is really what I think of when I think of simplifying. We take lines out of the pictures. Okay, which means I'm going to have fewer pieces. Okay, so if I have a fraction like 4/8, okay, I'm going to have, I'm going to use my pencil. I have my 8s here, but I'm talking about 4 of those pieces. Okay, and whenever we look at this fraction, it kind of becomes obvious that, well, half of my circle is shaded, and guess what? That's all simplifying fractions is finding a fraction that it's the same as, but it's a little bit easier to draw. 1/2 is much easier to draw than 4/8. But to prove to you what I'm talking about when I say taking lines out of the picture, all I'm doing is erasing these lines. I'm not changing how much was shaded, but here, instead of having those 8 pieces, now I only have 2. I have this piece on the left, and I have this piece on the right, but I'm only talking about this one piece out of these 2 pieces now. So last time, whenever we were talking about finding equivalent fractions, and we multiplied. Whenever we did that, we took and we multiplied our numbers to get to that bigger number. Well, in order for us to get to this smaller number, we're going to use the inverse operation. We're going to use the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So instead of having 8 pieces, I have 2. And I know I have to divide, so 8 divided by 4 equals 2. And it's the same thing. You have to do the same thing on the top and the bottom. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Okay? It's important that you know that it's the same thing that you do to both your top and bottom numbers. If I took and I didn't have these same numbers on the top and the bottom, I didn't do the same thing to both numbers, I'm going to end up with something that looks different. It's not going to be the same, okay? It's not going to be an equivalent fraction. As long as you do the same thing on the top to your top number, your numerator, and your denominator, it shows that it's going to give you the same amount. Just like whenever we were finding equivalent fractions, and I said 472 times 1 equaled 472. Well, guess what? 472 divided by 1 also equals 472. So here, as long as you do the same thing on the top and the bottom, you're multiplying or dividing by 1. Okay? I can just change this to be something like 4/4. Okay? So really, in simplifying fractions, it's very, very, very similar to finding equivalent fractions. This way, we're just making less pieces, where with finding equivalent fractions, we were making more.